So I've noticed that this is a very long video, and I don't have a particularly optimistic estimate of how many people are going to click on this video intending to watch all of it. But I just want to say I would really appreciate it if you could somehow watch the whole video. You could, like, once you get bored, you could watch the rest some other time. You could put it on the background, stuff like that. It would just be really nice for me to know that there are some people out there in the world who know what it is I've been dealing with all of this time, because it makes me feel so alone and lost in the world. If you may also wonder why I look so comically ugly in this video. That didn't used to be the case. I was once considered very attractive, but I had braces, and they changed the shape of my face a lot, and I didn't do anything about it, and because of the mental challenges I've been facing that you will find out in the rest of this video. Yeah, I didn't do anything about it, and now I'm kind of ugly. And this webcam is incredibly bad, doesn't help, and my hair is all over the place because I haven't seen any point in doing anything about my hair, and you'll find out why that is also the case in the rest of the video. So please try and see if you can watch as much of it as you can if you yeah. See ya. Hello everyone, my name is Will, and I have lost what is almost an entire decade of my life. I don't really know how I'm going to make this video. I've tried to make similar videos several times over the years. I even wrote a book about it once. But the way I've communicated it has always been incredibly poor, because it's just such a difficult thing to try and communicate. So I'm just going to start saying things and not think about how well it is I'm explaining all of it. So basically, I was a normal kid, had a good sense of humor, I was really kind, and didn't have any like mental issues or anything like that. I was always really like mentally resilient about stuff. I was just a fun kid, you know. I was just like everybody else. I got chronic fatigue syndrome when I was 10 or 9, and that was difficult for a few years, but as I said, I was very emotionally strong. It didn't really affect me that much. I just found stuff to do. Like there was this game called Club Penguin, and I was on there all the time. And yeah, I was just sort of just fairly sort of happy. Found lots of things funny, and I didn't really let it get me down. When I was 13, when I was 12, I started to discover that I had this natural, really strong curiosity about the universe, space, and stuff like that, science. And I just sort of knew in my heart that I was supposed to be an astronomer, an astrophysicist, whatever. I would look up at the stars and I would feel this immense sense of wonder and fascination. And I bought all these books about space and I read them all the time. And went to an observatory and that stuff. And then when I was 13, I started a YouTube channel, the one you're watching this video on right now. And everyone said I was really funny and my videos were really good, and I was probably going to be famous, is what people said. and I sort of became convinced that was going to happen in my heart. It felt like if I had been able to make it work, it was like the most perfect thing imaginable because like comedy had always been something like a really big part of my brain, and it also gave me a way to interact with lots of people, gain like social connections, which I'd been missing because of all the time that I'd spent being ill. And I just had this really strong feeling of like something really cool could be about to happen, something really good, and that would make me that would sort of be like the resolution to all of the bad stuff that I'd experienced. Like it sort of it felt like it sort of all led to that moment where I had started this YouTube channel and everyone was saying that I was going to be able to make something out of it. And then I had this scientific curiosity and amazement, and I knew everything I was going to do there. I was like really good. I was like really smart and intelligent at the time, and I also wanted to make like a YouTube channel about space, and so I was gonna have like both of those things, and then I was gonna study as hard as I possibly could and try and get into like Oxford University and do the physics course and get like a master's degree in astrophysics and then a PhD and do whatever. Just sort of find out like what my potential was. I just wanted to know as much as I possibly could about the universe and discover as much as I could and contribute to science, just in whatever way that I could. It didn't really matter. I didn't have to be the smartest person in the entire world. I didn't have to be the next Einstein. I just wanted to be whatever it was I was going to be capable of doing. So I had lots to look forward to about that. I was really, really excited about doing all of that. But one day, somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos. There was this girl, and I started talking to her, and we started talking a lot. We would sort of, and I ended up in this situation where I would sort of stare at my phone all day long talking to this girl, and we would sort of just talk about like nonsense, childish stuff. She kind of just, she kind of just, uh, she like, she, she, well, she like fulfilled all of the like childish elements of my brain that was still present as I was only 14 years old. And obviously, I had a deep yearning for connection with people, which everybody does, but I naturally have it quite a lot. I like, I function much better when I have connections with people, but also because of the isolation that I experienced due to my illness. It made me more susceptible to become like really intensely uh, invested in a person, I suppose. So we ended up talking all day long. I would literally just stare at my phone 12 hours a day from like 9 a.m. until, well, we would often stop talking at like 1 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m. and that just became my life. I didn't make videos anymore. I couldn't, because I had I had no room for creative or intelligent thought in my brain anymore, because I spent every second of my life staring at my phone, talking to this girl, and all we do was talk about complete nonsense. And I didn't read books anymore, and I didn't even think about space. I didn't look up at the stars and stuff like that. And I was doing this course in cosmology, and I stopped doing that. I stopped doing anything. I stopped doing anything that I was doing before talking to her. Everything just became unimportant, meaningless, and, well, I was just incapable of doing anything, because my concentration skills had been completely depleted from just staring at my phone all day long. I couldn't concentrate in school anymore. I just couldn't do anything other than talk to her. That was now the extent of my mental and emotional capacity. Now the thing was that this girl lived about 200 miles away, up in the northern part of England, and I'm from the southern part. So what I had done was I had developed this incredibly strong attachment to somebody that I could never actually be in the presence of. And that was really emotionally difficult, as you can imagine it would be. I noticed quite. It didn't take very long. After we first started talking, for me to realize that I had depression. Like, I couldn't eat, couldn't get out of bed, I had no energy. I cried all of the time for no reason. I had all these mood swings, all that kind of stuff that I'd never experienced in my whole life. But yeah, I had developed every symptom of what is considered clinical depression. This was in 2015. And yeah, I was just completely and utterly, ridiculously in love with somebody who I couldn't ever be with. And we did meet up in August 2015. And then after that, it was very difficult to not be with her, because I now knew what it was like to be with her. And we had to meet up again. I had to go over and stay at her house, otherwise we both would have gone crazy. Because we then became together. We decided we had to be in a long distance relationship, because the feelings between us were so strong that if we didn't get together, we'd have gone crazy. So I went there, and then I came back, and I was very sad. I cried a lot. And so we had to get into a long distance relationship. Something I forgot to mention is that after we met for the first time, I was so desperate to go back and be with her that I remember I was like lying in my bed and I ended up like throwing things out of the window because it was just so like I was so in love with her and it was so difficult to have such a close attachment with somebody and to just be like torn apart in the world. And I was only 14 years old, so and I barely had any like emotional experience, not only because of my age, but because of um, all I'd really done since developing chronic fatigue syndrome in me was stay indoors and just do my own thing. So I hadn't really had like I just hadn't really had anything uh, anything that could give me transferable skills and strength emotionally to this situation. So it it just completely messed my brain up. So once we had met, um, it was extremely difficult to not continue to be with her. So I was like going crazy, and but we managed to both convince our parents to let me go and stay at her house up in the 200 miles away. And yeah, um, then we did that, and it was sort of like it was just perfection. Like we didn't even have to talk; just being in each other's presence was everything just felt um, well. It felt like it was meant to be. It felt like the universe had put all these obstacles between us, and we were like meant to be together. It was like some kind of destiny that we had to. And it was like the distance between us was a test, and we had to overcome it um, because we were meant to be together. And I believed that with every tiny part of my heart. I actually believed that was true. It was this incredibly strong feeling of this is meant to be happening, and I developed really severe acne because of all the hormones that were going on. I had spots all over my face, um, and I was really depressed. And but I was so indescribably in love with this person. I believed sincerely that I loved her more than anybody had ever loved anybody. When I would look at other people's relationships, I would feel sort of smug because I had this thing that was just so profoundly special that just surpassed everything else that anybody had ever experienced. But when it got to October, she had started talking to me a lot about her mental problems, like about anxiety and depression and stuff like that, panic attacks. And the thing was that because of how in love with her I was very emotionally involved with her well-being. I cared about her more deeply than anything else. And anytime that she would say that she was sad or something like that, then it would make me very, very sad. And the idea of her having depression completely destroyed me mentally. And I just couldn't cope with it. So any time that she would mention anything relating to having poor mental health, it would just completely destroy my mood. I could be in a really good mood. I remember this one particular time when I had come back from school and I was listening to some music and I just felt happy. Just was in a really good mood. And then I got a message from her and she was just started saying this depressing stuff. And I was just completely deflated. My mood was just completely, every bit of happiness, every bit of enjoyment I had in that moment was taken away because the way she felt greatly impacted and in fact determined the way that I felt all of the time. And that kept happening a lot. So it's just like constantly having a hammer bashed into your head. Every single time she would send me any message of that nature, it would just completely ruin my whole day. And I just felt, yeah, so what was happening was that I had every emotion going on constantly and always at the most intense possible level. The most intense possible love, the most intense possible sadness, and then the most intense possible happiness, and then most intense, and other stuff. What ended up happening was after a while of constantly having my brain smashed in, I started to feel differently towards her because my brain had started to associate her with negative emotions. And so there came this point where I suddenly realized that I was not in love with her anymore. So I had to try and pretend that I felt exactly the same way as I did before, but it was really hard, and she noticed because I started to reply to all of her messages in a really short way. Like I'll just reply with one word or something, and I just acted differently. And we ended up having these arguments about it. Because if you're in a relationship with somebody and then they start like acting really distant towards you, then you're not going to be happy about it, are you? So we just kept getting into these arguments all of the time. And even though my feelings had changed, I couldn't let go of it because of how special it had been. and how strongly attached I was. So it didn't. I was not capable of like um, not being in a relationship anymore because it had completely taken over my brain, all my emotions, my whole life, and it had appeared so special and profound in the beginning. If I were to try and leave it, 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 it just felt impossible. It just felt like I was gonna, felt like leaving my own mind, because it was now my identity. It now encompassed everything of who I was because everything else about me had stopped being the case because of the relationship. So, like, my YouTube channel, I didn't do that anymore. My interest in science and the universe and stuff, I no longer had it. There was no longer any mental, there was no longer any room for that in my brain. Um, so I'd kind of lost everything about myself, and I was now only this relationship. So even though I wasn't strictly like in love anymore, it was not possible for me to. It just did not feel possible for me to exit the relationship. So what I would do is I would try and force myself to feel the same way again as much as I possibly could. I'll try so hard, and that was extremely mentally exhausting and draining to try and force yourself to love somebody. But I did manage to sort of succeed, and we would we would get to a good place again. But then from that point on, um, it was now very fragile. So anytime she said anything that slightly upset me or annoyed me, then I would go back to feeling like I had to distance myself. Like I couldn't send her any messages. It, I'd feel this blockage in my brain. I'd feel like there was something in there telling me to not send her a message. And if I did send one, it was telling me to um, not put any effort into it. So that kept happening. And then every time that happened, I would again force myself as much as I possibly could to love her again. And then it would happen again. Then we'd have an argument about it. And then I would say, oh, I'm sorry, and then I would try and force myself again, and she'd say something again that would make me go back into that distant state. Then we'd have another argument about it. And it just went on and on and on like that. So I just kept feeling this extreme anger, and then I would put this extreme effort into forcing myself to feel the same love as I did before. And then I would feel this extreme sadness about something she said, like if she said she was crying or she had anxiety or something. And then it would just cycle like this. Then we would meet up, and then it would be really good. It was always perfect whenever we met up. There was nothing negative about that. And that's one of the reasons why we just couldn't stay apart from each other, because of how good it was between us when we did meet up. And that was really emotionally difficult because we would meet up and we've had this extreme amount of happiness and then we'd feel this extreme amount of sadness when we had to leave each other again. And then we'd go back into that cycle that I described before, where she would say something that would upset me, and then my feelings would go back behind the wall. I would feel a blockage, and then I'd have to force myself out of it. And then it would go back again, and we'd have an argument, blah 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 blah, until we met up again. And that was the situation for some months. And then things started to get really bad in like May, June. Our arguments were just so frequent, and I was just feeling so depressed, and the relationship had really dwindled, gotten to a point where it was just so bad, but we had to keep it together because it was just too difficult to leave each other. And there was this other girl involved, her friend, who caused problems between us, and just absolutely hated her. And I just felt so drained and exhausted and depressed. And I just knew that it had been quite some time since I'd been myself, and I just knew that once this relationship ended, which I knew it had to soon because of how poor it had become, I was just going to be lost. I couldn't see anything beyond the relationship ending. I didn't know what it was going to become because I just completely didn't know myself anymore at all. And so I was just clinging on as hard as I possibly could to this thing that was just so obviously bad for me. But I couldn't bear to lose it because I didn't have anything else anymore. That was now that was now me, that was now my life, so losing it would feel like just losing my life, losing myself. So I kept trying really hard to force myself to not to feel something and to keep it with me, but it just kept getting worse and worse. The arguments kept getting worse, and in July I started to feel sort of strange, like mentally, sort of fuzzy and foggy and blurry a little bit. And in about, I think it was October, it finally had to come to an end. She wasn't as apprehensive about ending it as I was, because she didn't really do anything much before she started talking to me. Like, I had the YouTube channel which everybody had told me I was going to be successful, and then I now lost that. So I had this image in my head of this alternative version of my life where I hadn't met her, and I'd now be like I'd have this YouTube channel. Lots of people would I found it very difficult to deal with the idea that I could potentially be having some success with that right now if I hadn't been talking to her. I didn't want to have to face the reality of that once she had gone as well. I didn't feel like I would be able to go back to it because of so much had changed. And I'd also hadn't done anything in the way of developing myself cognitively in all that time, and I knew that it would be difficult to return to what I was trying to pursue intellectually. I just found it really daunting, the idea of what my life could look like once the relationship had ended. I just couldn't imagine it anymore, because for a year and a half, which was how long we were together, that was the extent of me, the extent of my life, and the extent of what I saw the future being. So it just felt like the most terrifying thing in the world for the relationship to end, even though it had to. So when she was trying to break up with me, I was absolutely begging and begging for her to not do it, because I was just so terrified of my life after it. I didn't want to have to face I just couldn't picture myself without her. So I just felt like that was like the end of my life if the relationship had ended, and that was just so terrifying as a concept. So I tried as hard as I possibly could to not make the relationship end, but it but we had to, and afterwards I just felt utterly emotionally drained. I felt totally just like I just had everything zapped out of me. So depressed. And there was this one day where I went outside. I was just walking. I was walking around, and I was getting like some anxiety. On top of everything else, I was getting anxiety about like cars outside. Just because I was in such an anxious, depressed state about everything, that made me think that I was scared of like people. I assumed they were dangerous, and when I was walking, I got up to the school, and I just sort of stood there for a minute, and suddenly my entire experience of reality just changed in an instant. Like there was this thing that just washed over me, and then it's like everything became behind a screen, and it felt like my consciousness was splitting away from my body. And it was the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. And I had to run home. I was just so terrified of what was happening. I felt like I was going to lose my consciousness and splitting away from me. I ran home, and I just spent, and I just entered this complete state of derealization where nothing seemed real. Everything looked weird, like it was behind a screen. And when I talked, it didn't sound like it was me talking. It was like detached from me, and suddenly I didn't have feelings attached to certain things that I did before. Everything sort of became meaningless, like the concepts of things. I couldn't connect to them anymore. And every waking moment was just a complete nightmare. Every second was just this unrelenting hell I was in. And I thought it might go away in like a couple of weeks or something, but it didn't. It didn't. I just stayed like that. A couple months later, it was Christmas, and that was my first Christmas where it wasn't really Christmas because I no longer had the concept of it. I couldn't connect to what that meant. I didn't have the specific feeling of Christmas. And first Christmas where I was doing nothing but suffering. The first Christmas that didn't count. Um, and for the first couple of years, it was just complete 24/7 hell to deal with. To be in that state of reality 24/7, where things don't seem real. You're sort of petrified of your own existence because it's been sort of cut in half. Like you're half dead. Like you half don't exist. Half of you does. It's just the most confusing, bizarre, terrifying experience. And it was it didn't get any easier to deal with until like 2-3 years later, where I sort of got used to it. But although I got used to it, I never got over it. It's 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 just completely, you can't, it's unlivable. It just destroys every aspect of your life. Everything that you enjoyed, everything that meant anything to you. Just going outside is a completely different experience that you can't really connect to things on a sensory level as you could before. Everything's sort of blurry and just strange and fuzzy and weird and not interesting, not captivating, not beautiful, not pretty, not nice. Just sort of a bit like this the quality of this camera. This is what it's like to, when you look at me through this, it's sort of what it's like to look at reality when you have derealization. And I had this memory of what it was like to experience reality in the normal way. And I just wanted so bad to just go back to that. Just hack my brain and force it to go back to that normal way of experiencing things, but it just didn't happen. The thing is that many people who experience derealization, depersonalization, they can get over it. Because the reason it exists is to detach you from reality in order to detach you from whatever emotional stress it was you were experiencing. It's a defense mechanism. life is too painful, existing is too painful. So if you become detached from existence, then it is supposedly less painful. That's the rationale behind this alteration in brain chemistry that occurs. So what you have to do in order to recover from it is to reduce or eliminate enough emotional stress, enough sources of emotional stress in your life so that it would be safe for your brain to return to where it was before. That's the situation that you have to get yourself in order to recover from it. But the problem was that I could never do that because I couldn't get over this. First of all, the thing with my YouTube channel, the fact that I didn't get to find out what would have happened about that. If I had just been able to try and I didn't succeed with it, then that's fine. I mean, that's something that happens to everybody in every like whatever occupation or dream somebody has. It's not always the case that you can actualize it. Sometimes you try and you just don't succeed, and you have to do something else. You just accept it. And that's fine. That's just life. But the problem was that I didn't actually get to try. I didn't get to find out what would have happened if I had continued making videos. So I had this idea that there was this alternative universe where I hadn't started talking to her, and I'd continued making videos, and that had become successful, and I just wanted to see it. I wanted to be in that universe. I couldn't accept that I didn't get to see that. And I tried to make videos again. I just couldn't do it because I'd completely changed as a person, psychologically, mentally, and it just felt like the time had passed. Any time I tried to do it again, I just couldn't do it. And nothing to talk about. I didn't enjoy it. It just didn't work. And in terms of like intellectual stuff, derealization had removed my ability to think about the universe and all that stuff and feel like interest and passion. I couldn't connect to it because I couldn't see it as being real. Like all of those feelings that I got, fascination and excitement and awe and passion, were a result of me being able to comprehend the universe and everything, and the fact that it seemed real to me. Because if it doesn't seem real, then how can you possibly be interested? But it did seem real to me before, and that's why. But once it didn't seem real, there was just no. So I would try and go and read about space and stuff again, but all I could feel was anger because I would remember what it felt like when I used to read this sort of stuff. And I would think about how I could still be feeling like that if I hadn't met her, and how this is stuff I would have learned ages ago if I hadn't met her. And I would feel this absolute horror about the way that I just couldn't connect to it because it didn't seem real, so it didn't seem to matter to me. And when I thought about how I used to feel, that was really traumatizing, and I just couldn't keep reading. I had to stop. And then I would try again, and then the same thing would happen. And some other time I'd try again, and the same thing would happen. Happened every single time. So, anytime that anything about space, science came up, I would have to avoid it. Instead of engage with it, like I used to, as much as possible, I avoided it as much as possible. Because it was just too painful to think about. And the problem with that was that the longer I spent doing that, the harder that was going to be. The harder it would be to get back to it, because the more time I would have lost, the more anger and reservation I'll build up about doing it again. Like, it was really important to me that I was as intellectually able as possible, because I just had this. I knew I just needed to understand the universe as much as I possibly could. That was my life purpose in a way. And that was going to depend entirely on my cognitive ability. And that was going to depend on the things that I did in all of my developmental years. And I'd spent a year and a half in that relationship just rotting my brain. And then I developed this psychiatric condition. And I couldn't return to learning about those things mentally. And the longer I didn't do that, the more time built up where I could have been learning, and the more difficult that was going to make it at any point in time for me to go back to it, because yes, once that's been several years, I just couldn't accept how much learning, how much development I had lost. I would try and for example, I would get a maths book and I would try to solve problems, and all I could think about was how much easier would this be right now if I hadn't started talking to that girl. And then I would just get angry, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't enjoy it ever again, because that was always in the back of my mind. This is definitely harder because I met her. Imagine how much easier this would be, and how much more I'd be enjoying it if I hadn't met her, if I didn't have derealization, and if I didn't have to miss out on all of that learning and development. And so no matter how many times I tried to go back to it, that would always stop me. And all I really felt like I could do was like play video games and watch TV and just become absorbed by like media. Just like doing things which just have no productivity whatsoever. And when I wasn't doing that, what I would do is I would fantasize about the life that I would have had if this didn't happen. So I would fantasize about myself at all sorts of different ages, like what it would have been like at the last years of school if I hadn't met her. Fantasized about doing my A levels and going. I fantasized about myself at university, and then I fantasized about my scientific career. Fantasized about my YouTube career. Like think about videos I would have made, and I think about like books I could have written, and I just think I think about like holidays and experiences I would have enjoyed, and I fantasize about people I would have been in relationships with, what children I would have had, who I would have married. Um, so I've spent like a lot of my life fantasizing about what my life would have been in the alternative universe where I hadn't met her. Um, I would just become like completely engulfed in it. Like I would sort of, I would it almost felt like it was really happening if I fantasized hard enough. It would almost feel like it was real. So I would really enjoy all those fantasies, and it just became so much easier to do that than to actually go back to do anything that I was supposed to be doing in order to create that life. It was too hard to go and read stuff about space again, because of all the what I was talking about earlier, and I couldn't make videos anymore, and I just didn't see any. There just wasn't anything else that I wanted to do with my life. So it just it was just much it was just so easy to just live in that world of fantasy rather than actually do anything in reality. So I would just do that for years and years and years and years. I would just spend my time fantasizing about what my life would have been in the alternative circumstances where I didn't meet Chloe. Uh, and when I wasn't doing that, I would just be suffering, or I would just watch YouTube videos, play games, and watch TV. And that's all I've done. That's been my entire life for over 8 years. There was a time a few years ago where uh, I almost sort of returned my brain to, I almost recovered from derealization. And basically, what happened was I was sending her a bunch of messages, like, explaining everything about what I'd experienced, and it felt like I kind of got to a point where I felt like if she just knew, if I knew that she fully understood how much pain I had been in because I met her, then I might then then I could reach some kind of acceptance. And it almost happened. I could feel reality coming back, but I overthought it. I thought I had to send it at like exact perfect time, and when I sent the last message, ended up regretting one thing that I said in it, and I had to say another one, and basically I just prevented myself from recovering from it. It nearly happened. I could feel reality going back to normal, but I blew it, and then it didn't. And I remember once, I remember thinking to myself that one day I'm not even going to remember what it was like, and I reached that point a little while ago. A while ago, I just stopped being able to remember what it felt like to not have that, to not be derealized, and to feel like it just be normal. And, yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember what that felt like now. It's now been over 8 years that I've had that, and it's been over 8 years that I've been just suffering 24/7. I mean, this year I kind of reached a point where I just didn't really think about it much anymore. I would enjoy watching videos and TV and playing games, and but else, I've been struggling in the past couple months about something else, and then once I'd stopped thinking about that, I was brushing my teeth the other day, and it just suddenly occurred to me that I have lost 8 years of my life. Um, um, well, could argue it was 9, but no, I don't know. And yeah, I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with thinking about what my life was once, and what it could have been, what could have been happening instead in the past years, 8 years. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with losing that much of your life? Especially when it was all these younger years, like from the age of 15 to 23, my entire youth has just been wasted. And the thing is, if as I said before, in order to recover from derealization, depersonalization, you have to have, it has to be a safe place. It needs to be, your brain needs need to have eliminated enough sources of emotional stress that it would be safe for your brain to come back. But it can't be that now, because I'm always going to have this trauma and this horror about this enormous chunk of my life that has been lost, and the specific chunk of time that it was. And I've also had a really bad relapse of chronic fatigue syndrome recently, so I actually can't go outside at all. I can't walk around and distract myself from it the way that I used to do. Because in 2020, 2021, I would just go outside and I would walk for hours and hours and hours on end. And that would help distract me from all of this. And while I was out there, I would spend all the time fantasizing about stuff. And, yeah, it would just kind of take me away from the reality of it. But at the moment, I literally can't go outside at all. I'm just stuck in here all day. So one of the things I keep thinking about, I've thought about this a lot over the years, the fact that, like, one day my parents aren't going to be around, and I spent all of this time with them being like this, and they never got to see me live my life properly, and how much I'm going to regret that. I already do. I already regret it an indescribable amount. What's it going to be like when they're not here? And what am I going to be like? I completely rely on them. What the hell am I going to do? What's this going to be like when I'm older? I'm 23 now. Okay, but I'm going to get older and older and older and older. What's it going to be like when I'm 33, 43, or 53? It's just going to keep getting worse. I literally have nothing ahead of me but just this expanding horror. Very surreal. I've always found this incredibly surreal, how something like this could even be possible. I was sure that I was so mentally stable that I didn't really understand mental issues really. I didn't think that it would be possible for me to ever end up like that. And it's taken a lot. I've written a lot of music over the years. I don't know what I would have done without that. And I'm gonna try and release it. That'd be cool, I guess. I'm never, ever, ever, ever gonna be happy. It's no longer possible. I can't accept what's happened. I can't accept how much of my life I lost. How much I didn't get to experience. I can't accept what's happened to my brain. I can't accept any of it. So, to everybody watching this, if your life did not turn out like this, be very, very grateful. Be very, very, very grateful for what it is you have. And hold on to it. Because it is possible to end up like me. I now know that. I could never have imagined in a million years anything remotely close to this happening to me. But it did. And it could happen to somebody else. So you have to be I just feel completely lost. Like, who am I? What am I? How could I ever feel any kind of happiness ever again when I've spent so much time not even living. It's like if you imagine you're trapped in a box for 8 years between the ages of 15 and 23. What kind of person, how could you ever feel like a person when you'd spend all of that time just with no personal growth and development whatsoever, just stuck in a box? How can I ever feel normal? How can I ever feel like a person ever again? Just avoid. It's all I can ever be. Avoid. It felt, a few years ago, it felt sort of, I still had the concept of what it would be like to have a life. I still remembered what that was like, but now I have no concept of it at all. It just makes no sense to me when I think about it. What would that even mean? What is life? What is anything? What am I? I don't know. It's been too long. It's been too long since I've known what that's like. So, before I go, I just want to touch a little bit more on the braces thing. So, when I was in year 11 of school, when I was about 16, which was a little bit after we broke up, it turned out I was actually supposed to be really attractive. My face had matured to my sort of adult-looking face, and people, whenever I went into school, I would have like all the groups of girls in the year below me obsessing over me. It was quite surreal. It was sort of like entering a fairy tale. I mean, everything else about my life was wrong, but that was a good distraction. It was the only good thing about my life. But then in May, I got braces, and then I started to notice that my face was changing in a bad way. The thing was that because I was so like out of it mentally, I didn't do anything about it. I just let it happen. I kind of thought that it was just because of how much I was suffering. It was reflecting on my face, but that's just not really a thing that happens. It doesn't change the entire shape of your face. And I found out that a lot of people who have had braces experience the same thing. I looked it up and I saw all these people talking about it. So yeah, I kind of knew that was happening, but I just didn't do anything about it because I was too messed up. And I was also told that no one had ever regretted having braces, so I didn't really think it could be that. It definitely was. They should really tell me that that's a thing that can happen, but they don't. They literally just don't tell anybody. Everybody should be told that before they get braces, though it is possible for your face to change in a negative way, but they don't. Anyway, that's the other thing. Nothing I think about makes any difference. Like, if I say to myself, there's no point dwelling on the past, you might as well just do what it is you can do now to try and get back on track, and because that's the only thing you can do. Otherwise you can just stay here in this state forever. And I've had that thought to myself many times, and that motivation lasts for about 2 seconds. Then I start thinking about everything that's happened again, and I just feel like total crap again. I think what hurts the most is thinking about my parents. All of this time, we've spent on this earth together, and how much of it I've just been stuck in this box. And I could have been living my life, could have been being me, but instead I was just like this. I just keep getting all these memories of when I was a kid. And what ended up happening, it just hurts so much. It just hurts so much to think about it. Too much. That's why I think I can never go back to normal, because it just hurts too much to face the reality of it. I want to say to them, I'm sorry, but I don't want them to have to think about it.